Jake Miller pressed his face against the transport window as Kepler Station came into view. The massive space station looked like a giant wheel spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Bright lights dotted its surface like stars, and ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it like busy insects. This was it, the Galactic Academy, the most famous school in known space where hundreds of different alien species came to learn together. And Jake was going to be one of only 2 humans ever to study there. The transport pilot, a blue-skinned creature with 4 arms, turned to look at him. First time seeing the Academy, young human? Jake nodded. Yes, sir. It's amazing. The pilot made a sound that might have been laughter. Wait until you see the inside. Just remember the rules they taught you about interacting with other species. Many of them have never seen a Deathworlder before. Jake's stomach twisted at that word. Deathworlder. That's what they called humans, and a few other species that came from dangerous planets. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world because of its high gravity, violent weather, and deadly creatures. Most other species came from much safer planets with gentle climates and peaceful animals. The transport docked with a soft bump. Jake grabbed a single bag and followed the pilot through the airlock. The moment he stepped onto the station, he felt the difference. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making him feel like he might float away. The air smelled strange, too clean, with a sweet scent he couldn't identify. Other students moved through the corridors, and Jake tried not to stare. There were tall, thin beings with silver skin that seemed to glow. Small furry creatures that walked on 4 legs but held books with tiny hands. Rock-like beings that moved slowly and spoke in deep, rumbling voices. And many others he couldn't even begin to describe. They all stopped to look at him as he passed. Some backed away. Others whispered each other in languages he didn't understand. A few just stared with wide eyes. Jake found his way to the registration office, where a holographic map showed him the path. Behind a curved desk sat a creature that looked like a giant insect with beautiful rainbow wings. Her name tag said Administrator Velka. "You must be Jake Miller," she said in perfect English, though her voice sounded like music. "Welcome to Galactic Academy. I have your room assignment and class schedule." She handed him a small device that projected his information into the air. "You'll be sharing living quarters with another human student, Lisa Park. She arrived yesterday. Your first class is Advanced Xenobiology with Professor Zint at 0800 station time tomorrow." Jake thanked her and made his way to the residential section. The corridors here were quieter, with soft lighting that changed colors slowly. He found his room number and pressed his hand to the door scanner. The door slid open to reveal a space about twice the size of his bedroom back home. There were 2 sleeping areas separated by a partition, a small kitchen, and a study area with chairs that looked like they were made for beings much different from humans. "You must be Jake." He turned to see a girl about his age with short black hair and a friendly smile. She was clearly human, and Jake felt a wave of relief. "Lisa Park," she said, extending her hand. "I can't tell you how good it is to see another human face." They shook hands, and Jake was surprised by how normal it felt after all the strange sights he'd seen. "How has it been so far?" Jake asked, setting his bag on the empty sleeping platform. Lisa's smile faded a little. "Interesting. Most of the other students are really nice, but they're all kind of afraid of us. Apparently, Deathworlders have a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" "Violent, unpredictable, dangerous." Lisa sat down on one of the strange chairs. "The thing is, most species here evolve on planets where the biggest threat might be bad weather or running out of food. They've never had to deal with predators or natural disasters like we have on Earth." Jake thought about this. "So they think we're monsters?" "Not monsters, exactly. More like time bombs. They think we might snap and hurt someone without warning." Lisa laughed, but it didn't sound happy. "Yesterday in my first class, I dropped my notebook and everyone jumped when it hit the floor. They're that nervous around us." Jake spent the rest of the day exploring the station with Lisa. The academy was incredible. There were laboratories with equipment he'd never seen, libraries with books from hundreds of worlds, and observation decks with views of the galaxy that took his breath away. But everywhere they went, other students watched them carefully. Groups would stop talking when they approached. Some beings would actually leave rooms when they entered. "You'll get used to it," Lisa said as they ate dinner in the cafeteria. The food was strange, but not bad, mostly plants and synthetic proteins that tasted like familiar things from Earth. At a nearby table, a group of students was talking in hushed voices. Jake could only understand a few words, but he heard humans and dangerous several times. One of them, a tall being with crystalline skin, kept glancing over at them. "That's Veltar," Lisa whispered. "He's in my quantum physics class. Really smart, but he acts like I might bite him." Jake looked around the cafeteria. There were probably 50 different species represented, all eating together peacefully. But there was an invisible circle around the human table. No one sat within 3 tables of them. "Why do we even get accepted here?" Jake asked, "If they're so worried about us." Lisa pushed her food around on her plate. "I think it's politics. Earth just joined the Galactic Federation 5 years ago. This is supposed to show that humans can integrate peacefully with other species." She looked up at him. "No pressure, right?" That night, Jake lay on his sleeping platform staring at the ceiling. Through the small window, he could see stars and the curve of a nearby planet. Tomorrow he would start classes with beings from across the galaxy. He would try to prove that humans weren't the dangerous monsters everyone seemed to think they were. But deep down, a small part of him wondered if they might be right to be afraid. Humans had conquered Earth by being better predators than anything else on the planet. What would happen if that side of his nature ever came out? Jake pushed the thought away and tried to sleep. Tomorrow was a new day, and he was determined to show everyone that humans could be just as peaceful as any other species in the galaxy. He had no idea how wrong he would be. Jake's first day of advanced xenobiology class was worse than he expected. Professor Zinth was a tall, elegant being with smooth gray skin and large black eyes that seemed to see everything. He moved gracefully around the classroom, which was filled with students from at least 15 different species. Jake and Lisa sat in the back row, as far from the other students as possible. It wasn't their choice. The other beings had simply chosen seats away from them, leaving a clear gap around the 2 humans. Today we begin our study of predator-prey relationships across different worlds. Professor Zinn said in a voice like flowing water. This is one of the most important concepts in xenobiology because it shapes how species evolve and interact. Jake tried to take notes, but he kept noticing how the other students reacted to him. When he reached for his pen, the crystalline being named Veltar flinched. When he shifted in his seat, a small furry creature called Quinda actually squeaked in fear. "Mr. Miller," Professor Zinn said suddenly, "perhaps you could share your perspective on predator adaptation?" Every head in the room turned to look at Jake. He felt his face get hot. I'm sorry, Professor. Could you repeat the question?" "Of course. On your homeworld of Earth, what adaptations do predators typically develop?" Jake thought carefully. He didn't want to say anything that would make the other students more afraid of him. Well, they usually develop better senses, better reflexes, and they learn to think ahead, to predict what their prey might do. A ripple of whispers went through the classroom. Jake heard the word terrifying in at least 3 different languages. Professor Zint nodded. "An excellent observation. And what about pack hunting behavior? Some predators work together to catch prey that's too big or too smart for one hunter to catch alone," Jake said. "They coordinate their attacks and use different tactics depending on the situation." The whispers got louder. A student near the front actually got up and moved to a seat farther away from Jake. Lisa leaned over and whispered, "Maybe try to sound less knowledgeable about hunting?" But Professor Zint seemed pleased with Jake's answers. "Very good. It's clear that coming from a Class 12 Deathworld has given you unique insights into these concepts." Over the next few weeks, Jake tried to fit into academy life. He joined the Interspecies Friendship Club, where he mostly sat quietly while other beings discussed cultural exchange. He volunteered to help in the library, but the librarian seemed nervous having him around the rare books. He even tried out for the low-gravity sports team, but his Earth-evolved reflexes made him too fast and strong for the other players. Every morning, he and Lisa walked to class together through corridors full of students who stepped aside to let them pass. In the cafeteria, they sat alone at their table while conversations stopped whenever they came near. "I punched a wall yesterday," Lisa told him one morning over breakfast. Jake nearly choked on his synthetic fruit juice. "What? Why?" "I was frustrated about the chemistry assignment, and I just reacted, hit the wall of my room." Lisa looked embarrassed. "I forgot these walls aren't built for earth-strength impacts. I put a dent in it." "Did anyone see?" "My roommate. She's a Melodian named SIVRA. Really nice, actually, but now she keeps looking at my hands like they're weapons." Lisa sighed. "The maintenance crew came to fix it, and they kept asking if I was having violent episodes and if I needed to see a counselor." Jake knew exactly what she meant. Just yesterday, he had accidentally broken a stylus by gripping it too hard during an exam. The sound it made when it snapped caused 3 students to jump out of their seats. But the real problem was more subtle. Jake was starting to notice things that bothered him. The way Veltar's crystalline body language showed stress patterns that others missed. How Quinda's ear movements indicated she was lying when she said she wasn't afraid. The fact that Professor Kellen limped slightly on his left side, suggesting an old injury that made him vulnerable. These weren't thoughts Jake wanted to have. But his human brain, evolved on a world full of predators and prey, couldn't stop analyzing everyone around him for weaknesses and threats. In xenobiology class, things got more complicated when they started studying extinct species. Professor Zint showed them holographic reconstructions of creatures that had once terrorized entire star systems before being wiped out by advancing civilizations. The Shadow Stalker of Endoria Prime, Professor Zint said, as a dark, shifting form appeared in the center classroom, one of the most successful apex predators ever recorded. It could phase between dimensions, making it nearly impossible to track or trap. Jake studied the hologram with interest, but he noticed something that seemed to escape everyone else. The creature's movement patterns, the way it shifted and flowed. There was a logic to it, a predictability that his human brain could follow. It hunted by learning its prey's behavioral patterns, the professor continued. Once it understood how a species thought and reacted, it became almost impossible to escape. How was it finally eliminated? Asked a student with blue-scaled skin. Advanced technology and coordinated military strikes. It took the combined fleets of 12 worlds to drive them to extinction. Professor Zint gestured and the hologram faded. Fortunately, they exist now only in our historical records. But as Jake watched the Shadow Stalker disappear, he felt a strange certainty that if he ever encountered a real one, he would know how to fight it. The thought disturbed him deeply. After class, Professor Zint asked Jake to stay behind. Lisa gave him a worried look, but left with the other students. "Mr. Miller, I want to discuss your performance in class," the professor said once they were alone. Jake's heart sank. "Am I doing something wrong?" "On the contrary, your insights have been remarkable. Your understanding of predatory behavior surpasses that of students who have been studying xenobiology for years." Professor Zinta's large black eyes seemed to look right through him. "But I've noticed that your classmates seem uncomfortable around you." "I know, sir. I'm trying not to scare them." "That's just it, Mr. Miller. I don't think you're trying to scare them at all. But your very presence reminds them of concepts they find frightening." Professor Zint moved closer. "May I ask you something personal?" Jake nodded. "When you look at your classmates, what do you see?" Jake hesitated. This felt like a trap, but Professor Zint seemed genuinely curious, not accusatory. "I see their strengths and weaknesses," Jake said quietly. "I notice how they move, how they react to stress, what makes them nervous. I can't help it. My brain just analyzes everything automatically." Professor Zint was quiet for a long moment. "And do you ever think about harming them?" "No," Jake said quickly. "Never. I would never hurt anyone here. I notice things." "I believe you, Mr. Miller. But I think you should understand something important." Professor Zint gestured toward the door where the other students had left. "Most species in this academy evolved as prey animals. Their ancestors survived by being cautious, by avoiding conflict, by hiding from danger. You evolved as something different." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Tomorrow we have a special lesson planned," Professor Zint continued. a practical simulation to help students understand predator behavior in a safe, controlled environment. I hope you'll find it educational. As Jake left the classroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that Professor Zint knew something he wasn't saying, and the way he had emphasized safe and controlled made Jake wonder if tomorrow's lesson would be as harmless as it sounded. The next morning, Jake arrived at xenobiology class to find the room transformed. The normal desks were gone, replaced by observation platforms around the edges. In the center was a large open space with what looked like advanced holographic projectors. Lisa was already there, looking as confused as Jake felt. The other students seemed excited rather than their usual nervous. Even Veltar was practically glowing with anticipation. Today we experience a control predator simulation, Professor Zint announced as everyone took their places on the observation platforms. You will observe the hunting patterns of the shadow stalker we studied yesterday, but in a completely safe holographic environment. Jake felt that same chill from the day before. Something about this felt wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what. Professor Zint moved to a control panel. The simulation will show you how the shadow stalker hunted on Andoria Prime, before its extinction. You'll see its phasing abilities, its stalking behavior, and its attack patterns. Remember, this is purely educational. The hologram cannot harm you. The lights dimmed, and the projectors hummed to life. In the center of the room, the same dark, shifting form from yesterday began to take shape. But this time it looked more solid, more real. Jake's instincts immediately screamed danger. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, and his muscles tensed without him thinking about it. He glanced around and saw that the other students were watching with fascination, completely relaxed. "Beautiful, isn't it?" whispered Quinda to her neighbor. "Look how it moves." But Jake wasn't seeing beauty. His human brain was analyzing the creature's movements, tracking its patterns, calculating threat levels. And everything his instincts told him said this was not a hologram. The shadow stalker began to move around the room, its form rippling like dark water. It seemed to be testing the space, learning the environment. When it passed near the observation platforms, several students leaned forward for a better look. Jake stood up. "Professor, I think we should." That's when the creature turned and looked directly at him. Jake's blood went ice cold. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of wild animals back on Earth. It was the look of a predator that had just found prey. "Professor Zint," Jake called out more urgently. "Something's wrong." But Professor Zint was focused on his control panel, frowning at readings that didn't make sense. The holographic matrix is showing some unusual fluctuations, but the shadow stalker suddenly phased through the floor and disappeared. For a moment, there was silence. Then Quinda giggled. "Where did it go? Is it supposed to do that?" Jake was already moving. His human instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution on a deadly world, were screaming that they were all in terrible danger. He jumped down from his platform and grabbed Lisa's arm. "We need to get everyone out of here. Now!" "Jake, what's wrong?" Lisa asked, but she could see the fear in his eyes. "It's not a hologram anymore. I don't know how, but it's real." Before Lisa could respond, the emergency lights began flashing red. An alarm started wailing throughout the station. Over the intercom, a mechanical voice announced, "Security breach in Laboratory Section 7. All students evacuate immediately." But they weren't fast enough. The shadow stalker materialized behind Veltar. The crystalline being didn't even have time to scream before the creature's dark tendrils wrapped around him and both vanished through the wall. Chaos erupted. Students screamed and scattered in all directions. Professor Zint was frantically pressing buttons on his control panel, but nothing was responding. "The containment field has failed," he shouted over the alarms. "The security systems are down." The shadow stalker appeared again, this time near the entrance. 3 students were running for the door when it floated up from the floor in front of them. A blue scale being named Talkran was caught in its grasp and dragged through the solid wall. Jake's training back on Earth kicked in. When hiking in dangerous wilderness, the first rule was to stay calm and think. Panicking got you killed. "Lisa," he called, "get Professor Zint and barricade yourselves in the supply room." "What about you?" Jake was already moving toward the center of the room, putting himself between the creature and the fleeing students. Just go. The shadow stalker noticed him immediately. It rose up to its full height, nearly 3 meters tall, and Jake could see intelligence in its shifting form. This wasn't just a mindless predator. It was smart, adaptable, and it was studying him. For a moment, predator faced predator across the classroom. The creature made its move first, phasing partially out of reality and rushing toward a group of students huddled near the far wall. But Jake had been watching its patterns, learning how it moved. He grabbed a heavy stool and hurled it not at where the creature was, but where his instincts told him it would be. The stool passed harmlessly through empty air, but the shadow stalker suddenly materialized right where Jake had predicted, struck by the improvised projectile. It let out a sound like breaking glass and turned its full attention to him. Jake felt a strange calm settle over him. This was what humans were built for, not just to run from predators, but to face them down, to outthink them, to be the thing that even the monsters feared. The shadow stalker charged at him, moving faster than anything had a right to move. But Jake was already rolling to the side, his Earth-evolved reflexes making him seem to blur. The creature's attack hit nothing but air. Impossible! Professor Zint whispered from where Lisa had dragged him behind an overturned table. No being should be able to track its movements that precisely. But Jake wasn't done. As the shadow stalker recovered from its missed attack, he was already moving again. He grabbed a portable computer terminal and swung it like a club, timing his strike for the exact moment the creature solidified to change direction. The impact sent the shadow stalker tumbling across the room. It hit the wall and partially phased through it, clearly injured and confused. For the first time since materializing, it hesitated. That's when Jake realized something that chilled him to the bone. He wasn't just fighting the creature. He was hunting it. The shadow stalker seemed to realize this too. It looked around the room at the cowering students, then back at Jake. In its alien intelligence, it was making a calculation. It had found something more dangerous than prey. It had found another apex predator. The creature began to back away, its form rippling with what Jake somehow recognized as fear. It started to phase through the wall, retreating from a fight it was no longer sure could win. But Jake's predator instincts weren't finished. The rational part of his mind screamed at him to let it go, to be thankful it was leaving. But something deeper, something carved into his DNA by the harsh evolution of Earth, demanded that he finish what had been started. A true predator never let dangerous prey escape to hunt again. The shadow stalker was almost through the wall when Jake moved. He launched himself forward with the full power of his Earth-evolved muscles, reaching the creature just as it tried to fully phase out of reality. For a moment that seemed to last forever, human and alien predator were locked together, half in this dimension and half in another. Jake felt the strange sensation of existing in multiple realities at once. His consciousness stretched across space that shouldn't exist. Then they crashed back into normal space, and Jake found himself face to face with something that had terrorized entire star systems. And he realized that he wasn't afraid anymore. He was angry. When Jake and the shadow stalker crashed back into normal space, something fundamental changed in the classroom. The air itself seemed to thicken with tension as two apex predators faced each other in a space meant for peaceful learning. Jake landed on his feet, his earth-trained balance keeping him upright. The shadow stalker hit the ground in a heap of writhing darkness, clearly disoriented from being pulled out of its phased state. But Jake didn't wait for it to recover. Moving with fluid precision that surprised even him, Jake grabbed a plasma cutter from Professor Zinta's demonstration table. The tool was meant for cutting molecular bonds in lab samples, but Jake's human brain immediately saw its potential as a weapon. The shadow stalker rose up, towering over him. Its form shifted and rippled, trying to phase out again. But Jake had learned something important when they were locked together between dimensions. The creature had to solidify completely for a split second when it changed directions or attacked. He waited. The creature lunged at him, its tendrils reaching out like dark lightning. At the exact moment it solidified to make contact, Jake activated the plasma cutter and sliced through one of its appendages. The shadow stalker's scream was like the sound of metal tearing. It stumbled backward, dark fluid leaking from where its tendril had been severed. From behind the overturned table, Professor Zint watched in amazement. The human is actually hurting it. That should be impossible. Lisa peered over the edge of their makeshift barricade. That's not Jake fighting, she whispered. That's something else. She was right. This wasn't the quiet, careful human who had been trying so hard to fit in at the academy. This was something primal and deadly that had awakened inside Jake Miller. Every movement was calculated for maximum efficiency. Every action served a single purpose, to eliminate the threat. The Shadow Stalker tried a different approach. Instead of attacking directly, it began to phase in and out rapidly, appearing and disappearing around the room. It was trying to confuse Jake, to make him lose track of where the real attack would come from. But Jake's human pattern recognition, evolved from ancestors who had tracked prey across vast savannas and through dense forests, was already mapping the creature's movement. He could see the logic behind its tactics, the rhythm of its attacks. When the Shadow Stalker materialized behind him for what should have been a killing strike, Jake was already turning. He grabbed a gravity generator from the physics demonstration area and swung it like a club. The device was meant to create small fields of altered gravity for teaching purposes, but when it connected with the creature's solid form, the feedback loop created a localized space distortion. The Shadow Stalker was caught in a bubble of twisted gravity, its form stretching and compressing as space-time warped around it. It let out another scream and managed to break free, but Jake could see that it was weakening. More importantly, he could see that it was afraid. Jake picked up another piece of equipment, an energy conduit meant for channeling power between lab stations. His human brain, constantly analyzing and adapting, had realized something the creature hadn't expected. Every piece of technology in this room was a potential weapon in the hands of someone who understood how to use tools for violence. Humans had conquered Earth not just through strength or speed, but by being the only species that could turn anything in their environment into a weapon. The Shadow Stalker backed toward the wall, its form rippling with what Jake now recognized as panic. It had spent eons hunting prey that either ran in terror or fought with simple, predictable tactics. It had never encountered something that fought back with intelligence, that adapted in real time, that got more dangerous the longer the fight continued. Jake advanced slowly, the energy conduit crackling with power in his hands. But he wasn't just walking forward. He was hurting the creature, cutting off its escape routes, driving it toward a corner where its phasing abilities would be limited. This is what a real predator looks like, Jake said quietly, though his voice carried clearly through the silent room. He wasn't talking to the Shadow Stalker. It probably couldn't understand human language anyway. He was talking to himself, finally understanding what he truly was. The creature made one last desperate attack, gathering all its remaining strength to phase directly through Jake's body, intending to tear him apart from the inside. But Jake had been waiting for exactly that move. As the Shadow Stalker phased into him, Jake activated the energy conduit. The electrical discharge wouldn't have harmed either of them normally. The creature existed partially outside normal space, and Jake's human body was protected by its bioelectric field. But when they occupied the same space, the feedback created a resonance cascade that disrupted the creature's ability to maintain its phase state. The Shadow Stalker was forcibly materialized while still partially inside Jake's body. The result was catastrophic. For the creature, Jake felt the alien predator's life force collapse as its form became locked in normal space. The Shadow Stalker tried to scream, but no sound came out. Its dark tendrils began to dissolve, its intelligence fading as the energy that maintained its existence scattered across multiple dimensions. In seconds, it was over. Jake stood alone in the center of the classroom, the energy conduit still humming in his hands. Around him, the Shadow Stalker's remains were already fading, becoming nothing more than wisps of dark smoke that dispersed into the air. The silence that followed was absolute. Slowly, Jake set down the energy conduit and looked around the room. The other students were staring at him from their hiding places with expressions he couldn't read. Fear, yes, but also something else. Awe, maybe, or recognition. Professor Zint emerged from behind the overturned table, his large black eyes wide with something that might have been wonder. Remarkable, he said softly. In all my years of studying predator behavior, I have never seen anything like that. The creature was completely outclassed. Jake felt the adrenaline beginning to fade, and with it came the realization of what he had just done, what he had become. He looked down at his hands. Human hands had just destroyed one of the most dangerous predators in galactic history. Lisa approached him cautiously. "Jake, are you okay?" He looked up at her, then at the other students who were slowly emerging from their hiding places. Veltar and Talkran were gone, taken by the creature before Jake could stop it. Two beings were dead because he hadn't acted fast enough, but the others were alive because he had finally stopped trying to be something he wasn't. "I'm sorry," Jake said to the room in general. "I know I scared you." "I scared myself." Professor Zint shook his head. "You saved us, Mr. Miller. All of us." He gestured at the fading remains of the Shadow Stalker. That creature had killed thousands before it was thought extinct. Without your intervention, everyone in this room would have died. "But now you know what I really am," Jake said quietly. "What humans really are." Quinda, the small furry being who had always been terrified of him, stepped forward. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence it carried clearly. "You're the thing that hunts the hunters," she said. "You're the predator that even predators fear." Jake nodded slowly. There was no point in denying it anymore. "Yes," he said, "that's exactly what we are." 3 days after the Shadow Stalker incident, Jake sat in a formal hearing room facing the Academy Council. The council was made up of representatives from 12 different species, all of them looking at him with expressions ranging from fear to fascination. Chancellor Morden, a tall being with golden skin and no visible eyes, spoke for the group. "Jake Miller of Earth, you have been called before this council to answer for your actions during the recent security breach." Jake had expected this. He had spent the past 3 days in isolation while the council decided what to do with him. Lisa had been allowed to visit once, and she told him that some faculty members wanted him expelled immediately. Others wanted him studied like a specimen. "I understand, Chancellor," Jake said. "I'm ready to answer your questions. First, we must address the deaths of students Veltar and Talkran. The security recordings show that you were present when the creature took them. Why did you not act to save them?" Jake felt the familiar weight of guilt settle on his shoulders. "I didn't understand what was happening fast enough. I thought it was still a hologram until it was too late. If I had realized sooner." "But you did realize eventually," interrupted Counselor Vex, an insectoid being whose wings buzzed with agitation. "The recordings show that you identified the threat, while others still believed it was a simulation." "How?" Jake considered his words carefully. "My instincts told me something was wrong. Humans evolved on a dangerous world. We're good at recognizing threats." "Good at recognizing them, perhaps," said another counselor. "But the recordings show much more than recognition. You fought the creature with tactics and strategies that suggest extensive combat training. Do all humans possess such abilities?" "I've never had combat training," Jake said honestly. "What you saw was just instinct." The council members exchanged glances. Chancellor Morden leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, what you call instinct defeated one of the most dangerous predators in recorded galactic history. This raises serious questions about the nature of your species and whether humans can safely coexist with other beings." Jake felt his heart sink. This was it. They were going to ban humans from the Academy, maybe from the entire Federation. But then Professor Zint entered the hearing room. "Chancellor, if I may," the professor said, bowing respectfully to the council. "I have prepared a report on these events that I believe the council should consider." Chancellor Morden gestured for him to proceed. "I have spent the past 3 days analyzing every aspect of what occurred in my classroom," Professor Zint began. "I have also interviewed the surviving students and reviewed all available data on human evolution and psychology." He activated a holographic display that showed Earth rotating slowly in the center of the room. "We have fundamentally misunderstood what it means to be a Deathworlder species," he continued. "We classified humans as dangerous because they evolved on a violent planet, but we failed to understand the implications of that evolution. The hologram changed to show various Earth creatures, lions, wolves, sharks, and others. Most species in the Federation evolved as prey animals or omnivores on relatively peaceful worlds. When we encountered predator species, we assumed they were threats to be contained. But humans represent something different entirely." Jake watched as the display showed human ancestors hunting various creatures, working together, using tools. Humans did not evolve as simple predators, Professor Zint explained. They evolved as the apex predator on a world full of apex predators. They became the thing that hunts other hunters, the creature that even the most dangerous predators fear. Counselor Vex's wings buzz louder. That makes them more dangerous, not less. Does it? Professor Zint asked. In the 3 weeks Jake Miller has been at this academy, how many students has he harmed? None, Chancellor Morden admitted. How many times has he used his strength or speed to intimidate others? None that have been reported. And when faced with genuine threat to his fellow students, beings from species he had never encountered before, who had shown him nothing but fear and suspicion, what did he do? The room was quiet for a moment. Then Quinda's voice came from the back of the room. Jake turned in surprise. He hadn't realized any students were present. He protected us, she said, walking forward. Her small furry form trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. He put himself between the monster and everyone else. More students began filing into the hearing room. Jake saw familiar faces, beings who had spent weeks avoiding him, whispering about him, treating him like a dangerous animal. Lisa was among them, and she smiled at Jake before addressing the council. Permission to speak, Chancellor? Granted, Lisa Park of Earth. I've been watching Jake for weeks now, Lisa said. I've seen how hard he's tried to fit in, how careful he's been not to scare anyone. He could have demanded respect based on his strength. He could have intimidated anyone who avoided him. Instead, he's been patient and kind, even when people treated him unfairly. Veltar, who Jake thought had been killed, stepped forward. His crystalline form showed stress fractures, but he was alive. The creature took me to another dimension, Veltar said. I was certain I would die there. But somehow, when Jake Miller fought it, I was pulled back to normal space. His battle didn't just defeat the monster. It rescued those of us who had already been taken. Jake stared in amazement. Talkran appeared next to Veltar, also alive but clearly shaken. We owe our lives to human, Talkran said. To both humans, actually. Lisa Park organized search parties to look for us while Jake was fighting. Professor Zint nodded approvingly. This is what I discovered in my research. Predator species like humans don't just hunt prey. They hunt other predators. They are nature's answer to apex predators, evolved specifically to be the thing that even the most dangerous creatures cannot defeat. The holographic display changed again, showing various galactic conflicts throughout history. Every major predator species that has threatened the Federation has eventually been stopped not by our technology or our combined fleets, but by the emergence of an even more effective predator. We simply never recognized this pattern because we assumed all predators were threats. Chancellor Morden was quiet for a long time, considering Professor Zinta's words. What are you suggesting, Professor? I am suggesting that we have been asking the wrong question, Professor Zint replied. Instead of asking whether humans are too dangerous to be among us, we should be asking why we would ever want to face the galaxy's dangers without them. The professor gestured toward Jake. Mr. Miller didn't become violent when threatened. He became protective. His instincts didn't drive him to harm the innocent. They drove him to eliminate threats to the innocent. This is not the behavior of a mindless predator. This is the behavior of a guardian. Quinda stepped closer to Jake. She was still clearly nervous, but she looked up at him with something new in her eyes. I want to say something, she said quietly. I was terrified of you, Jake Miller. All of us were. But I realize now that we were afraid of the wrong thing. She turned to address the council. We were afraid that he might hurt us. But we should have been afraid of what might happen if he wasn't there to protect us. The Shadow Stalker wasn't the first dangerous thing to threaten this academy, and it won't be the last. Maybe it's time we stopped seeing strength as a threat and started seeing it as protection. Other students began to speak up, sharing their own thoughts about what they had witnessed. Many admitted they had been wrong, to fear Jake. Others talked about feeling safer knowing that there were beings like him willing to stand between them and danger. Chancellor Morden finally raised his hand for silence. Jake Miller of Earth, he said formally, this council finds that your actions during the security breach were heroic and necessary. You are cleared of any wrongdoing. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. However, the Chancellor continued, your actions have also revealed capabilities that could be valuable to the entire Federation. The Council would like to propose the creation of a new program, the Guardian Initiative. Deathworlder species would be invited to serve as protectors for peaceful worlds and institutions like this academy. Professor Zint nodded approvingly. An excellent proposal. Mr. Miller has already proven that predator species can work harmoniously with prey species when their abilities are properly understood and utilized. Jake looked around the room at the faces watching him. The fear was still there in some eyes, but it was mixed with respect now and understanding. I accept, Jake said, but I want to continue my regular studies too. I came here to learn, not just to fight. Of course, Chancellor Morden agreed. You will remain a student first, but you will also serve as proof that strength and gentleness can coexist. As the hearing ended and students began filing out, Quinda approached Jake one more time. I have a question, she said. If you're so much more dangerous than the rest of us, why are you gentle? Why don't you just take what you want? Jake thought about that for a moment. Because that's not what makes humans apex predators, he said finally. Lots of species are strong or fast or have sharp teeth. What makes humans special is that we choose what to do with our strength. We protect things that matter to us. Quinda smiled, the first time Jake had ever seen her do so in his presence. I think I understand now, she said. You're not dangerous to us because we matter to you. Jake nodded. Exactly. As Jake and Lisa walked back to their quarters that evening, the corridor seemed different. Students still moved out of their way, but now it felt like respect rather than fear. Some even nodded or offered quiet greetings. So, Lisa said as they reached their door, Guardian Initiative, huh? Think other humans will want to sign up? Jake considered this. I think there are humans who would be honored to protect others, but they'll need to understand what we learned today. What's that? Jake looked back down the corridor, where students from dozens of different worlds were going about their evening routines in peace and safety. Being a predator isn't about being dangerous, he said. It's about making sure the people you care about never have to face danger alone. In the days that followed, word of the Guardian Initiative spread throughout the Federation. Applications began arriving from Deathworlder species across the galaxy. Not just humans, but others who had evolved on dangerous worlds and developed the skills to face serious threats. And in Professor Zinta's xenobiology class, the lesson plan was permanently changed. Instead of studying predator and prey as opposing forces, students now learned about symbiosis, how the most dangerous predators often became the most dedicated protectors of the very species they could easily dominate. Jake Miller, the human who had once been feared as a potential threat, became the Academy's most popular student, not because he was dangerous, but because everyone knew that with him around, they were safe. The predator had found his true purpose, not as a hunter-prey, but as a guardian of the innocent.